And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is The Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here. Today on the big program, lots to get to, lots to talk about. Oh, the fun, oh, the entertainment, oh, the enjoyment. We found out recently that we've got a Pennsylvania Senate candidate, Dr. Oz, who evidently thinks that kids having sex and having kids with their cousins, not a big deal. As long as it's not your first cousin, that second one, I guess he grew up in an environment, kissing cousins things, okay, not a big deal. As long as it's not your first cousin, you do what you got to do. Also found out that Donald Trump actually did have the nuclear secrets that he claimed that he didn't have, and stored them there at his Golden Palace. And the weird thing is not a peep from the party of family values or the party of law and order. Very interesting. The silence, kind of deafening. Crickets, if you will. And why? Because, well, this is who the Republican Party is. This is who they are, and their candidates. Oh, the candidates. They're fun. Some bad, some worse, some even worse than worse. And, for instance, and this is one of those things I wanted to get to yesterday, but didn't have a chance. Because understand, I've believed for years that, Democrats, Republicans, Independents, Greens, Libertarians, everybody kind of in the same, heading towards the same destination. We want to get to the same kind of place. I'm questioning that in a huge way. The kind of world conservatives want to move us towards, frightening. And I look at this state senator from South Carolina. Yeah, South Carolina. A guy named Richard Cash. He, again, now go back to Dr. Oz. Hey, it's okay as long as you're not first cousins. This Senator Cash, he's making the case that 16 and 17-year-olds are mature enough to get married as long as they've got parental consent, but oddly enough, not mature enough to access birth control, even with parental consent. It's just weird, and I guess you have to hear the clip, and I got to play this because South Carolina Senator Brad Hutto asks Senator Cash about his position on contraception. And, well, I think you just got to let the good senator from South Carolina speak for himself.
They're not mature enough to be taught about contraception in school, and they're not mature enough to receive contraception on their parents' health plan, and they're not mature enough to get contraception from the health department, but they are mature enough to get married? Is that what you're saying?
Well, it's a fair question, and I'm happy to answer it. I think my position, when this has come up before, is if a 16 or 17-year-old, certainly if they have their parental consent and they wish to get married and their parents approve it, then correct, I don't have a problem with that.
But you just moved to table a bill that required parental consent to get birth control pills on the parent's health plan. Where's the logic?
Well, the logic is I believe sex belongs within marriage because sex leads to children and children needs parents. And so I'm not in favor of the state paying for contraceptives for unmarried children. I don't think that's a good policy. I think children come from sex, and children need a mommy and a daddy, and that means marriage.
So mom and dad can give consent to get you married at 16, but not to put you on birth control.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
That's it. Yeah. For a second, thought it was Herschel Walker's kind of, and this is kind of the Republican positions on things. Let them talk and let them tell you what they twistedly believe. Now, again, South Carolina, another state. Remember, Republicans said, no, it's going to be a state's issue and we're going to protect the rights of mothers and all this stuff. South Carolina is now a state that has removed exemptions for rape and incest from women's abortive care. I mean, this is, again, listen to who they say they are, and who they are is kind of frightening. Now, again, all white guys, all good, God-fearing Christian white guys. And the question becomes is what kind of an America do we want? And like I said, I think this election is going to show us the direction that we're going. But, I've said for a while that, I used to believe that we all wanted the same destination. It was just different paths, different policies, different ideas. Not so much. So for me, where is this going to take us? Now, yesterday I got taken to task by a listener over my assertion that Reagan is responsible for the demise of this country, especially the demise of the working class. He still buys the myth that Reagan single-handedly took down the Soviets and is responsible for sliced bread or whatever. Still buys that myth of the sainted Reagan. And as I was going through this back and forth, my problem is I'm not a true believer in any one. There are no absolute heroes in any world. I don't even agree with myself 100% of the time. So I don't understand blind loyalty. I don't understand this kind of this blind faith. I understand making lives better. I want people's lives to get better. That's my North Star. When I was a kid growing up in the projects, I think about that kid growing up in that same place I lived and what opportunities and chances that kid's going to have. And I want them to have the same, if not better, than I had. It's pretty simple. But I look at this kind of division that's going on, and I'm curious your thoughts. 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. Are you concerned about the direction that we're going based on this blind faith ideology? This kind of command and control of individual liberty and lives, while saying it's about individual liberty and lives. For instance, federal judge in Texas, story broke today, has declared it unconstitutional for the Affordable Care Act to require insurance and employers to offer the HIV prevention drugs as part of their plans, claiming that somehow this violates Christian religious liberty. Well, kind of bizarre, but this is what it is. It's not like only gay people get HIV. I think we're past that. So I'm not sure what the rationale here is, other than just this control. And you listen to these ideologues, and the stuff that they throw is crazy. I mean, I go back to Dr. Oz. A clip has been unearthed of Dr. Oz speaking, saying that the uninsured don't have a right to health, which is kind of a twisted thing to say. But people should be given the ability to crawl their way back out of the abyss of being uninsured. And I'm going, am I confusing something here? Now, his solution is we should have giant festivals for healthcare, and people can get 15-minute physicals. It's a TV guy. This is the grand healthcare plan. This is the plan of how we're going to help people get the care that they need. Big festivals. You can come into the big pop tent and, turn your head and cough and all that. And the weird thing, and I go back to this, I used to believe this, that we wanted the same things, good jobs, safe neighborhoods, quality schools, health care, education, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, that stuff. But sadly, I come back to this. The more I talk to Trump supporters, the more I talk to Republicans and Republican candidates, the more I don't think we share a similar future. And this is where elections matter. This is where getting out and voting matters. For years, people were telling me, Rick, you're crazy. Roe is is decided law. They're not going to overturn Roe. They just use it for fundraising and for riling people up and getting people all lathered up in the panties. I'm going, no, they get the chance. They're going to do it. And they're going to go even further. Contraception is coming. And yet here we are. Here we are in this moment where conservatives are going in that route. And I keep asking myself, what happened to get government out of my life? What happened to smaller, less intrusive government? Now, we both know that was all nonsense. But the reality is this election matters. And matters in huge ways on how it's going to affect not just us in this moment, but the future generations of this country. What kind of a place do we want to leave? Now, the right does a masterful job of scaring people into, Joe Biden and socialism. And you go, I'm not seeing that. By all means, share. I'd love to hear the thoughts on what is socialism, especially from people who collect Social Security. I usually get, and those are the people who usually yell that the most because they're the most afraid of it. The ones who are secure with Social Security and Medicare. But, I'm not too far away from the place where the guy yelled at Arlen Specter, "Get your government hands off my Social Security." Quick note, Social Security is a government-run program, just for those who don't know. Just got to throw that out there. So I'd love to hear your thoughts. 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. What direction are we going? Are you concerned about the future? Quick break, right back with your thoughts after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show for working people from the top. If you're a fan of the show, you've heard our labor history in 2 segments, and you can hear them on the radio pretty much anywhere in the U.S. Labor history has never been more important than it is right now. So here's what we'd like you to do. Tell a teacher. Tell a teacher that labor history is important and that they can get digestible 2-minute lessons that are absolutely free. Free to download, free to use, free to share. Tell a teacher to go to thericksmithshow.com/history and help us put labor back where it belongs, in the classroom. Generations of American workers fought, bled, and died to build the American way of life. It's our job to keep their stories alive. Go tell a teacher that we're here to help them do just that. Find us at thericksmithshow.com/history today.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So today, President Obama and the First Lady were in D.C. for the official unfurling of the presidential portraits. Kind of took a while, don't you think? It's about 6 years since he's been out of office. And it then made the question, when Trump and Melania, when it's time for theirs, because look, whether you like it or not, he's going to have a portrait there. What should that look like? Now, interestingly, and not surprisingly, folks sent, images on Twitter of, him looking like a clown, and all of that. And I've had some racy comments about what Melania's picture should look like. But, ultimately, I want them to have their picture there. It should. Maybe with an asterisk somewhere near twice impeached and, some of the problems there. But this is one of those things where I think that it has to be done relatively soon. And I think it would be, incumbent on President Biden to move forward on that. Make sure that happens. Should be who we are. That institutions move forward and maintain, even if we don't agree. And look, I don't agree with almost anything that Trump did. A couple of policies I've given him, the credit he's due on. The renegotiation of NAFTA I thought was not horrible. He got a lot of input from labor and a lot of input from Democrats, and that that bipartisanship did help move it forward. The tariffs on China, I give him credit for that, even though it wasn't part of a bigger plan that you should have engaged the rest of the world around. But those are things that I agreed with and have always said that. What's interesting to me is I can't find a Republican right now who's going to give Joe Biden the credit that I think he deserves in this moment. And I look at this op-ed, written by Paul Krugman, and I like Krugman. I think he's a bright guy. I think the stories are his articles are important, but interesting column on. And look, this will make the Trump cult really, really angry, because he asked the question, has Biden economics been good for workers? And the answer is, yes. Jobs have been created. We've seen unemployment plummet. We've seen, people being able to change jobs. We've seen organizing happening. There's a lot of good stuff. And Krugman concludes that if you take food and energy out of the equation, since those are global commodities and things that no president really has absolute control over, when you take those out, that workers have done well under this president, and that inequality has begun to shrink. Now again, the alligator jaw is still wide open, but inequality is shrinking because a lot of the wage gains have been for the folks at the bottom, that we're buoying up the bottom, which for me, again, one of these moments where we should be raising the minimum wage so that that floor doesn't get to drop out at some point down the road, because we know how much, people love to give, like, hey, you're essential and you're a frontline hero and here's a bonus, and then claw it right back. Now, Krugman says that, Biden economics could lead to a revitalization of the labor movement in this country, because yes, there's a lot of organizing going on. There's a lot of energy around coming together. And for me, this is the exciting part of where we are, because this, I think, is the thing that we can agree on. While we may not ever agree on same-sex marriage or transgender issues, which are thrown out there specifically to divide and tear us apart, this should be one of those things that we do come together on, because as Krugman does say, unions do raise wages. That's their job, especially among, less skilled, low-wage workers. I point to this article over at the Washington Post, titled 4,000 Google cafeteria workers quietly unionized during the pandemic. And they pointed out that, and as I've said all along, union job, better life, that these workers at these Google offices, these cafeteria workers, their wages have gone up sufficiently. And as is pointed out in the piece, that the average unionized cafeteria worker at Google makes $24 an hour, pays virtually nothing for their health care, and has access to a retirement plan. Whereas the non-union folks like Sodexo, who I guess is just being organized down in Atlanta at the Google facility there, they make $15 an hour and pay through the nose for health care and have no pension whatsoever. Again, back to this, this union job, better life frame. This is what organizing does. And they finished up the article talking about this guy, Richard Ramirez, who a 33-year-old guy who works at this, works in the food chain there, the cafeteria chain in, I believe it's in Seattle, where he now makes, $27 an hour, has free health care, and doesn't think about, can I take my kids to the doctor? Doesn't think about, are they going to be okay? And he said in the article, he said, he thought he had it good. He was making $20 an hour at Google, and that was $11 more than he made at a job previously. But he didn't have any money for rent. He didn't have money for anything. And he was commuting, 3 hours back and forth to work, all this stuff. And because of the union, he got a livable wage. And, he said, since we unionized, I've bought a home, and that was basically only possible because we unionized. And for me, that's the message. I've been asked, why are you such a strong supporter? I go, because, when I was a kid, I watched lives get better. People got union jobs, food at the end of the month. Immediately better. Kids got, bikes, better clothing, better opportunities, bought a secondhand car, eventually moved out of that environment entirely. Lives got better. This is the message that needs to be repeatedly put out there. Out of the entire article, which was, a lot of the facts and figures and statistics and all this stuff, the part that grabbed me, this guy's story. The fact that through his work, his health security, doesn't worry about his kids getting sick, doesn't worry about if the kids fall and broken arm, playing on the monkey bars, because it has health security, has some retirement security. He's not worried about down the road, but also makes enough money that can buy a house, can build for the future. I mean, is that not the American dream? Is that not what we were told? Again, that work hard, play by the rules, get ahead frame. And is that not the common direction I think the vast majority of us want to go? Now, I go back to the stuff I talked about earlier. The fact that they divide us on all of these issues that aren't germane to our everyday lives. Same-sex marriage, I don't care about. And this is the weird part. I spend a lot of my day in the I don't care department. I don't care if two people get married. Wish them the best. Good for you. Doesn't matter to me at all. Why we have an entire political movement in this country are fixated on what other people are doing is beyond me. The transgender issue, I don't care. I want people to lead the best life that they can, pursue their happiness. God bless them. But does it matter to me what they do? No. And it shouldn't matter to anybody else because no one's making you do it either. But when did we become fixated on this stuff? As I said, in my workplace 30 years ago, we dealt with the transgender issue. Guy went away. He'd worked there for years. We knew him, he came back. He was a she. Nobody cared. Person came, did their job. They went home at the end of the day. It wasn't a big deal. Why now are these the things that we focus on? Well, because the powers to be know that this rips us apart. It divides us. It keeps us pitted against each other and not walking where we can together on issues where we should, like making lives better. The wealth class understands this. And while they may not be able to pay half the working class to murder the other half as easily as they've done in the past, they can pit us against each other. And this is the battleground of where they do it. I wish we would go back to the time where, as my grandfather said, don't worry about me, worry about yourself. This is one of those issues. Love to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 2011. That was the day hundreds of ILWU strikers blocked railroad tracks near Longview, Washington. They hoped to stop grain shipments from moving in and out of the EGT grain terminal. Longshoremen had been sitting down on the tracks throughout the summer, resulting in over 100 arrests. No trains had moved in or out of the terminal since July. But then a federal judge issued an injunction against ILWU pickets. The BNSF Railroad tried to move grain once again. ILWU picketers in Vancouver were able to hold off the train until police forcibly dispersed the crowd. Then, hundreds gathered at Longview to block the train from coming in. That's when police went on the offensive. They used clubs and pepper spray against the longshoremen, arresting 19. They threw ILWU President Bob McElrath to the ground. Rumors spread that police had broken his arm. Hundreds of regional longshoremen rushed to Longview. The Seattle and Tacoma ports shut down in protest. The next morning, 10,000 tons of grain were opened onto the railroad tracks. The grain export terminal was the first to be built in the Pacific Northwest in almost 30 years. EGT hoped to undercut the powerful ILWU, who controlled operations at the port since its founding in the 1930s. The union refused to agree to work 12-hour shifts at straight time. The EGT hoped to break the hiring halt by refusing to recognize maintenance and inside workers at the terminal. They then attempted to fill jobs with workers from the operating engineers, but the ILWU persevered. By the end of January, EGT had backed off many of its demands, negotiations resumed, and days later, the contract was signed.
In the world of work, what two occupations might seem to have the very least in common? How about long-haul truck drivers and school librarians? Yes, an odd pairing, but solidarity forever. Start with truckers. The job is literally a grueling haul. You're wrangling a massive 18-wheeler some 500 miles a day for 2-3 weeks straight, putting up with traffic jams, storms, bad roads, lunatic drivers, helter-skelter scheduling, truck stop food, sleeping in the truck, and battling fatigue, aches, your bladder, and loneliness. Trucking used to be a good union job with decent pay and conditions, until the deregulation craze 4 decades ago brought in Wall Street profiteers and fast-buck hustlers who turned the industry into anti-union exploiters. As a result, the yearly quit rate for drivers is almost 100%. But rather than retaining drivers by upping pay and stopping their torturous treatment, the corporate bosses have rushed to Washington, demanding access to an even cheaper pool of low-wage workers, teenagers. Yes, put an 18-year-old on that 18-wheeler and keep them profits rolling. And here's another good job suddenly turned ugly: school librarian. Yes, while student enrollments rise and the need for these nurturers of our society's literacy is greater than ever, their quit rate is soaring, not because of pay or long hours, but because of raw right-wing politics. These dedicated, invaluable educators are literally being abused by demagogic GOP politicians and their extremist partisans who've launched an anti-librarian crusade, including book banning and witch hunting. Come on, how twisted are you to pick on librarians? This is Jim Hightower saying, forget the law of supply and demand. Today's job market is being ruled by greedmeisters and political lunatics.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So lots of fun and entertainment around the former president who evidently claimed didn't have secrets, now has secrets. The story changes so much. Yeah, I got to get on the memo. Whatever the list of the Daily Lie is, I need to get on that. Because the litany of lies just building up, I really can't keep track of it. But the hope is that the folks at the DOJ, hopefully they're keeping track. And look, Exhibit A, Your Honor, here's all of the things that, well, as my grandfather always said, you have the right to remain silent. You probably should use it. Just a thought. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on the Trump situation. I've asked our good friend Sarah Burris to come talk with us. She's a reporter over at Raw Story, rawstory.com, the website if you want to check out the incredible work that she does. Sarah, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, happy Wednesday.
So, Michael Cohen, Trump's former fixer, says that indictment relatively soon.
I hope so. I don't know necessarily that it would be soon, because I don't think that Merrick Garland is going to indict somebody before an election, simply because I think what happened with Hillary Clinton is such a huge precedent that it freaked everybody out. And honestly, I think that's probably a good thing, because the last thing we need is to mobilize a whole bunch of MAGA people. And if we can, instead talk about things like Dr. Oz is already saying that he wouldn't have helped Trump and voted down the election if he was in the Senate in 2020. I mean, these are things that a lot of Republicans are sort of like backing away slowly from Donald Trump now that they're in the general election. And I think it would be nice to not energize a lot of those voters because Democrats are really energized right now.
As they should be. Look, I mean, the idea of saving democracy, kind of a big deal.
You would think, right? And to their credit, if you ask voters what their most important issues are, the most cohesive one that everybody mentions is they're concerned about democracy, particularly among Democrats. So at the very least, people are taking it seriously, as well we all should.
Yeah, and of course, they're saying it's row November. You know, because ultimately, you look at some of the policies coming out across the country, kind of, if you're a woman folk, I kind of worry.
It's a big deal. And so I've just spent the last couple of weeks digging through a whole bunch of data, both some surveys, some polling, voter registration, like a whole bunch of stuff since the Roe decision was handed down. And what I have found is that there is enough of a just a powerful response, both from women and men, but primarily from Democrats. And women are, especially young women under 25, are registering in just ridiculous numbers. I think it's like in some states, I want to say like Ohio, it's a 6-1 margin. It's Pennsylvania too is having a huge women registration movement that's happening, and it doesn't seem like this is a really huge national effort. Maybe it's local groups that are doing this on the ground and doing amazing work, but it's happening in ways that it's just, I've never seen anything like it. I've never seen numbers like this. And turnout obviously we know Kansas is a weird kind of deal, what happened there, but the amount of women that turned out for that election where abortion was on the ballot outnumbered men considerably. So if we can keep that level of momentum going in a lot of these states, I think, there's a chance. And the other piece of it is that Republicans have really, really crappy candidates. So when they talk about issues like choice, it's, they want to make it illegal at the moment of conception. They want to make contraception illegal. They want to ban the morning after pill. Like a lot of these things that are so far outside of the mainstream. And there's polling on this that shows that Americans actually support this, and it isn't just Democrats. Yeah. People like contraception or Plan B. It's something like 80% of Americans support that. So
it's almost a no-brainer.
Are on the wrong side.
And this is one of those things where if you're against abortion, wouldn't contraception be the answer to that?
One would think. I mean, that is the one thing that I feel like Democrats, particularly feminists, have been asking for a really long time, is if you want to reduce the number of abortions in America, why are you not funding contraception like everywhere? Every kind of contraception that you could possibly want, and putting it, for free in gumball machines.
Yeah, because look, if men got pregnant, I guarantee that it would be available for free on every street corner.
Yeah.
We'd have drive-through access. We'd have all kinds of things that haven't even been dreamt up yet.
Instead of people handing out Bible tracts at the airport, it would be people handing out condoms. Like, welcome to Philly. Here's a condom.
Yeah, no, it's always incredible to me that it's gotten to be this difficult, and it's going to get worse. Oh, that's the sad reality. But I do want to get some more thoughts on the Trump thing, because I think this is important.
It's been a bonkers story.
These documents are really important because I got to tell you, I'm worried about the empty folders.
Yeah.
I'm worried about what was in the empty folders. Will we ever get to know what was in the empty folders and what happened to it? What does he?
I know, right?
I mean, I'm literally tongue-tied on. You go, hello. He stole top secret documents.
A lot of these folders, like it is, they're attached to the folder, which means that somebody would have to, detach them from the folder and take them out of the folder. These classified documents, and we don't know. We have no idea what we don't know. Basically, we have no clue what documents were not there, and then where those documents could possibly be. It is enough of a serious situation where I think you could very reasonably make the case that this is a national security issue, and we should be sending people into all of his homes to ensure that he doesn't have this information. Like, already we found out that one of the documents he has, this was in the Post today, was not just about nuclear information, it was about some other country's nuclear information.
Yeah.
So one of the things that Michael Cohen was talking about tonight is, what if that's Israel? I mean, Jared Kushner got $2 billion from the Saudis. Is that what they sold? Is that how they got it? It's, you know, it's a completely hypothetical question. We know nothing at this point.
But it's a serious question. I mean, you know.
But it's the kind of questions that we shouldn't have to be asking. But here we are.
Yeah, but here we are. But here's the thing that gets me. I mean, I keep coming back to this place. Why is he still walking around because if this were you or me or anyone else, under the jail. Now I know my Trump supporters will say, you know, he waved the magic hand and declassified everything. But no,
doesn't matter.
No, he didn't.
It doesn't matter. Even if he waved a classified, you know, his magic wand, classification wand, he still stole government documents. And that's the major thing here that I think he can't get away from it. Even his own court filings are talking about how he is, you know, admitting that he took all of these government documents. And I think that's the piece where, you know, if we talk about the case with Judge Cannon, the crazy trumpet lawyer or judge, that case is going to slow things down for a little bit, but there are a ton of documents that he took prior to the search from the Justice Department, the search warrant that was issued in Florida. Tons of documents, and some of those were also classified. So, I mean, it's very easy for the Justice Department to be like, yeah, we can just let those sit for a minute, and we can start going over what are the next steps for the documents that we have already.
Now, you had Jared Kushner not too long ago say that this could just be a paperwork mistake. You know, they just, you know, they were moving out. They just happened to scoop up some of the wrong papers. It, you know, could happen to anyone. Which then leads to the question of, you know, how do we handle these top secret documents? How did he get access to them? You know, what's the chain of command and how this? Because they're not just in a file folder somewhere that he can just walk into. Oh, I'll take this. I'll take this. There has to be a process in which someone brought him those documents.
And that is the big question that I think a lot of folks are asking is, how did these documents, and actually it's something that Hillary Clinton was asking today, is these are the kind of documents where she said whenever she was Secretary of State, some dude would show up at her office with them handcuffed in a briefcase to his wrist, would open the briefcase, and she would have to read them in front of the dude and then sign off that she had read it and gave them back to him, and then he would walk away. So these are documents that Trump should never have had the ability to take upstairs to the residence. But, you know, my roommate made a really good point earlier today. Who's going to tell him not to? You know, who is in the White House who is going to say, sure, you can't do that? And who is going to stop him?
Yeah. So
with all of these documents upstairs at the White House, it makes it very easy for him to just throw them into a bunch of boxes and take them with him to Florida. But again, that doesn't make it legal.
Yeah.
And even, and to Jared's credit, yeah, sure, maybe Trump just sort of threw 50 boxes worth of stuff in with all of his, you know, shoes and flip-flops or whatever. But I think the bigger question is, if that's really true, then why did it take him 18 months, constant badgering from the National Archives, from the Justice Department, from back and forth lawyer emails and letters? Why did it take him so long to give them back? If you took a whole bunch of stuff that wasn't yours, and you'd be like, oh crap, my bad, here all of it is.
Yeah.
But instead it's taken Trump months, over a year.
You know, outside of the fact that he believes that he's entitled to everything, and that's just the personality that you had, and it's mine. I should be able to have this stuff. And you know, we now know that this was nuclear stuff, and he's had some bizarre fascination with nuclear information and with nukes in general. Remember when he wanted to nuke a hurricane?
Yeah. And he's wanted to nuke a bunch of countries, right? Like he's talked about Little Rocket Man and how he could blow up North Korea. He could blow up Russia, Syria. There's been a bunch of countries that he's mentioned that. And so there's this idea that, if he has nuclear information about the United States and he has nuke stuff about another country, like this just makes it even more serious that we make sure we get in all of his homes and touch every single pair of underwear he's got to make sure there's not a document in it.
You can do
right?
that. No thanks. That's
Well,
that's not in my pay grade. You listen to the Rick Smith Show with Sarah Burris. Sarah's a reporter over at Raw Story. Make sure you check out their website, rawstory.com, to get the stories of the day. But here's the weird thing. I mean, we're in this spot where, you've still got the cult who, they're buying the lies. This is the party of law and order. This is the party of, hold people accountable. Yet it seems that nothing this guy does. He's right. He could have shot somebody on Fifth Avenue and gotten away with it. And they're still going to defend. Is there a moment in this where people wake up and go, wait a second, no, this is really bad. This guy should be held accountable for something, because we don't want, the next president or the next to be able to do this kind of stuff or worse.
I think that when it comes to his supporters, I don't know why we even try to persuade them about anything. I just don't think that there's anything that's ever going to be able to move them. I think the majority of Americans, the non-MAGA Republicans, everybody else, I think they get it. I think they look at this and go, oh crap, this is really bad. This is really dangerous. This makes us look terrible to other countries. But it's just that a lot of Republicans, the loudest part of the Republican Party is the MAGA base. And that 30% of people, maybe we can't move them.
You just have to leave them behind. What's interesting to me is you're seeing some Republican voices coming out and going, well, we kind of are moving towards that F word, that fascism. We are becoming kind of maybe the party of authoritarianism, and going, becoming? Recently, you're just noticing? I've been saying this stuff for at least the last decade, that this is the way the party's been marching. And I find it interesting that there's still some folks out there trying to save the party, even though this is the direction they were going all along. Trump wasn't the leader of this; he was just somebody who benefited from it. Are you surprised at the number of people who are, I've been sounding the alarm?
I don't know necessarily that if they're just trying to be nice. I don't know for what reason is beyond me, but why?
Well, trying to save face, I would argue they're trying to save themselves. It's like a lot of the people who have come forward and given testimony. I think a lot of them just want to save themselves from prison.
Well, there's definitely that piece of it too, but this has been going on since 2010, and this has been going on before that. But I feel like that Tea Party piece of this, that really, crazy rabid nutter piece of this, really kicked up a notch in 2010 whenever the brown guy decided he was going to give everybody free health care, which isn't even free, right? But this is something where I think whatever Republicans are left who have not already committed themselves to the Trump train, maybe they're looking for a way off, and everybody is sort of saving face with this, like, oh, they're semi-fascist.
Yeah, semi-fascist.
Maybe they're giving them that piece of it to be like, look, we recognize these people are shady, so if you want to take an out, you better go now, because there's not going to be, it's going to be very quick before we start, when we start saying they're just straight up fascist, and we're all going to end up in re-education Republican camps or something.
Well, no, we're going to end up in Christian nationalist camps. I mean, there are a lot of people who are already arguing, a lot of our churches are already doing this kind of indoctrination. And I find it interesting that they point to, the teachers are indoctrinating our children with education and that book learning. When you look at what the right has done for years through these churches, that, wow.
But that's the thing about Republicans, is every time they say, no, it's you, then for sure it's them.
That kind of
over
projection.
and over, every accusation that they wield at us, And that's the thing about the fascism piece too, is that they've been calling us socialists for I don't know how long, and you're just like, really? I mean, and now a lot of people, I think, now you see the sort of big movement towards socialism. I think because Republicans have made it so appealing by talking about, all of these good things like Social Security and Medicare and education and I don't know, plumbing. All of that is socialism, and people are like, oh, I like that stuff.
Yeah,
Give me
water.
more.
Ask the people in
Right?
Jackson, Mississippi, what it's like to not have socialism and water.
Yeah, exactly. And now the governor there is already talking about privatizing their water. It's like, oh, okay, now we're just going to make your crappy water that you can't drink or brush your teeth with just twice as expensive.
Yeah, it's going to be like Bolivia. I think it was Bolivia when they privatized their water. They wouldn't even allow people to put out buckets to collect rainwater.
It's going to be really bad, and it sucks because Jackson's a decent town. Some good food in Jackson.
Yeah, we had a good time when we were there.
Yeah,
Scary,
it's heartbreaking.
Scary stuff. Last thing I got to get your thoughts on the Oath Keeper guy, this Stuart Rhodes, fired all of his attorneys because the way I'm reading this article is fired all the attorneys because they weren't crazy enough or presenting a crazy enough case. As I read this, I think it's just it was a stall tactic. Ultimately, didn't work.
That's kind of what the judge seems to think too, is the dude just wants to change his lawyers over and over and over again, which means that things are going to take longer and longer. And then maybe I guess he's not going to be a convicted felon, but the dude's in jail. Like, it's not like your life is going to get any better.
Yeah.
But I guess he wanted to try and hire another lawyer, and the judge just finally was like, no, we're not delaying this anymore. You're not firing your lawyers for the 50th time. Get over yourself.
There you go.
So we're moving forward. This is going to be a big case. This is the first of the seditious conspiracy cases.
Yeah.
So this will be interesting to watch.
I'm hoping for justice, and when justice is done, long jail sentence. Long jail sentence. There you go.
Amen.
Sarah, as always, amazing stuff. Hope folks will check out the website, rawstory.com. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Have a good weekend.
You as well, our good friend Sarah Burris. Make sure you check out her work over at rawstory.com. Quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people all the time. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. This day in labor history, the year was 1916. That was the day that the Federal Employees Compensation Act was signed into law by President Woodrow Wilson. The act was sponsored by Senator John Kern, a Democrat from Indiana, and Daniel McGillicuddy, a Democratic congressman from Maine. The act provided compensation for federal civil service employees that lost wages because they were hurt or killed on the job. There was great debate at the time over whether employees injured at work deserved to be compensated. Before the turn of the 20th century, those who sustained workplace injuries had little recourse. Employers blamed workers for accidents and typically refused compensation, leaving families destitute. Edward Gaynor, the president of the National Association of Letter Carriers, explained the debate around the 1916 proposal, saying, quote, "The only question, the fundamental question involved in this discussion is whether or not society should bear the burden of the injured worker in any industry." Increasingly, some lawmakers were beginning to make the case that society should indeed bear that burden. Workers and labor leaders organized around issues of workplace safety and demanded a compensation if they were injured on the job. The law providing such a safety net for federal employees was passed through the House of Representatives by an overwhelming margin of 288 to 6. Although the act only applied to federal employees, it was an important step forward in recognizing that all workers deserve to be compensated for workplace injuries. The Federal Office of Workers' Compensation Programs that operates today traces its history directly back to the 1916 Act. And because Because of this 1916 act, 3 million federal employees and their families are covered under the act's protection.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
Well, I look to Alabama. So, ladies, again, voting, kind of important. Women folk, make sure you're all registered up and ready to go cast your ballot come November, because this could be, well, could be any woman. Evidently, in Alabama, there was a woman who was arrested on charges of having an unregistered gun and a small amount of marijuana, which at some point I do see being legalized. I don't know that this is something you lock someone up for, but she was arrested with having this unregistered gun and the bit of pot. As has been reported, normally that you'd be able to get bond out while you're waiting for your trial. But because she's pregnant and has admitted to the pot thing, evidently they decided that they were going to put her in jail for 3 months. And despite the fact that she's had some bleeding conditions and some problems and a history of miscarriages and all this, they put her in a jail cell to protect the fetus, and there she is sleeping on the floor of the prison. Again, the party of family values. And this is the kind of weird, bizarre stuff where you go, explain to me the idea here. You're going to put her in an overcrowded jail, possibly where COVID could run rampant through there. Make her sleep on the floor. Who knows what comes up with that? But that little very, very interesting. But again, this is the world that we're heading towards. Now, if you really wanted to help this woman, if your problem is that she's doing the pot thing while pregnant, which not thrilled about, to be honest with you, the smoking, all that, not good. How about I don't know. How about rehab? How about helping her with rehab? Not just demanding that she gets rehab, but maybe helping, maybe having a facility that'd do that. Just kind of a thought. Instead of making that part of how she could get out by voluntarily going to rehab and paying for it and $10,000 in cash. This is where our system really screwed up. And the poor always get hammered by our judicial system. The scale of justice, not equal. We got a guy who stole classified documents, nuclear secrets for other countries. And he's still doing the retruthing. Something wrong with this scenario. Something wrong in a society where this is how you treat women. Now, look, here's the other part of this. I don't doubt if she gives birth in that jail cell that they would cuff her to the bed. Oh, we would never do that. Oh, you should probably check, because we do it all across the country. Tell me about family values, and then show me a place where you are okay with handcuffing a pregnant woman to a bed. Insane. But that's conservative world for us. Welcome to America. I got to tell you, I think there's a better way. I think we can have a better future. I think together we can fight for that better future. That's why elections matter. So if you're appalled by something like that, make sure you're registered to vote. And make sure come November, you get out there and you do it. That simple. That simple.
Small green plants lined the bed of what used to be a frontier lake between Switzerland and France. It's existed for 12,000 years, but now it's relegated to just a small stream.
More than half of Europe mired in worst drought in centuries. Climate change action is way more popular than Americans realize. Plus,
a country famed for its oil resources, committed to going to sustainable mobility.
Saudi Arabia pushes to become a global electric vehicle.
You're on board KCAA's Inland Talk Express. KCAA, Loma Linda,